Good afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome to Bernard from Trafford, Summing, and welcome to Amy. Is this your first? Have you been here before? I've just blurred memory. All right. Well, welcome anyway. Fair bit to get through, so I'm going to go straight into it. I've got no announcements. Has anybody else got? We've got no announcements. No announcements. Declarations of interest. We've had one with respect to fire pension. Anybody else with any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the last meeting. Have we all had them? Would somebody like to propose them? Don't rush. That's one. Joanne, seconder. Yvonne, thank you. And then straight into work programme.
Thanks, Chair. I've got the latest iteration of the work programme on the agenda. I'll just highlight some items that are suggested for inclusion in the coming months. We've got waste procurement update, March and May. The fire service programme for change, hopefully February, possibly March. An item on GMCA's corporate resilience and Brexit, scheduled for next month, February. An item on homelessness and rough sleeping and the allocation of grants to that policy area that's scheduled for the next meeting in February. And an item on transport governance and decision making, which is scheduled for April. In addition, the committee have been asked to consider the emerging drug and alcohol strategy for Greater Manchester in March. Thanks, Chair.
You got a comment, David?
Yeah, just about the meeting dates. I noticed we have a meeting down for the 21st of May. Last year, I don't think we had a May meeting because that'll be just about the time when council AGMs may be changing the composition of the meeting, so there might be attendance issues. So are we still having one on the 21st of May, giving that?
I think we need one. I think there's going to be I think we asked for a little bit more continuity last year. Have you got any comments on that, Andrew?
No. Stage, I suggest we keep that in and take stock next month when we've got more clarity around AGMs and the likelihood of having a membership that can attend. So we'll keep that under review, but if we could keep it in, it would be helpful.
Any other comments on work programme? Sorry.
So just a quickie. On the 12th of February meeting, this was drafted when a limited number of the budget papers would come to this meeting and then a smaller number to the next meeting. As you'll see from the agenda, you've got fewer this time than you might have expected. And so the transport levy and the CA's budget will be coming back along with the waste budget. We'll explain that later on the 15th of February as well. So there's going to be quite a wodge of budget items on the 15th of February.
Just could we put I'm sure we will think about it again, but could we actually put an agenda item for the 19th of March with respect to membership moving forward? Because if we miss that, that's quite important. So that's no other comments on work programme. So slight change of running order. We're going to take 6, which is GMCA budgets next, 6A. Then we're going to take 7, which is the age-friendly. And then we're going to go back to the update on the budget and waste services, because that then, if necessary, it can run straight into the Part B as the same piece, really. So GMCA budgets, mayoral, general budget, Richard.
Right, very So the legal process is that before the 1st of February, the Mayor must make a proposal to the combined authority, who in turn must consider his proposal and whether they want to issue a report on that for him to consider. The precise timetable is set out in the paper, but in a sense this is a first pass at the budget. It will come back to the 15th of February meeting and to the 12th of February meeting of this committee with the final figures. As you'll know from your own council budgets, tax bases and things change late on. Last year there was a decision to change the precept by £1 at the at that second stage. So this is a firm proposal from the Mayor, but there might be slight amendments to it when it comes back. It does propose an increase in the precept of a further £9 increase in relation to bus reform issues that are set out in the paper. The elements compared with the fire and rescue budget of the precept is unchanged from the current year. Just a couple of bits to pick out. Firstly, in terms of the fire service, the programme for change has not yet fully worked through and come back for approval. So the budget is put together on the basis of effectively the status quo, which requires it to be balanced from reserves in the short term. But it is a balanced budget. There are sufficient reserves to cover that in the short term. And the other slight complexity is that the transport order that we were expecting a year ago is still in the parliamentary pipeline. We are assured is going to appear at the end of January and be approved before the end of March. That would make certain of the bus functions and mayoral functions fundable directly through the precept. The fact that we haven't got the order in place when we set the budget means that the budget will actually be approved as part of the transport levy budget, but then the mayor can compensate districts through a grant to them to offset the cost of those. So this is moving the deck chairs around in terms of money, but effectively the mayoral precept is funding the work on bus that's described in here, but can't do so directly, has to give grants to the districts who can then pay an increased levy. The net effect on each district is unchanged. Assuming that the parliamentary order does get approved, then we'll effectively go back to being funded directly through the precept, and the levy can be readjusted downwards during the year. So we will see how things proceed through Parliament in the coming months. But we were here a year ago, and nothing has moved forward particularly far on that. So I'll leave it at that for questions or comments. In terms of you're invited to comment. Those comments will be fed back to the CA on Friday when it considers this paper, and whether the remainder of the leaders, i.e. the CA without the mayor, wish to comment on this proposal.
Open to the committee. Start with John Bell.
Yeah, I'd just like to just a brief comment on the fire budget. I note that you're using quite a lot of reserves on this, and I mean we must point out to the authority that you know this cannot continue, and it's got to be able to fund itself. You know, keep putting reserves in, and we did it last year as well. And also on the programme for change, could you give us an indication of when the review will be completed and when the mayor will be in a position to let us know what he proposes to do? Thanks.
Answer the first part of that. I mean, there are sufficient reserves. We are drawing down for capital funding, which has been the strategy for the Fire Authority previously. So we're continuing to fund the capital programme through reserves. The revenue budget is requiring just over 3 million of reserves next year, which is relatively small in the scale of the reserves that are available to the mayor and inherited from the Fire Authority. The bigger issue, as well as the programme for change in the long term, as you will have seen, there are substantial increased pension contributions required from the employer, just over £5 million a year. Now, we've received a grant, or we will receive a grant from the Home Office this year to cover virtually all of those costs. But that is quite a big chunk. Over £5 million of the shortfall in the subsequent years relates to the pension issue, which will be picked up in the comprehensive spending review, which is going to take place sometime in the next 6 or 9 months. What the outcome of that is, we can't tell, but it's certainly a pressure that government's going to have to consider for all fire services. So at one level, the numbers look worse than they are because of the pension shortfall and the fact that we don't know whether there's going to be any funding. But certainly for the first 2 years, and there's no intention not to implement programme for change within that time frame, but there's more than 2 years worth of reserves to see us through this. So as the Treasurer, I'm assured at the moment that there will be plans in place, and we will come back with a balanced budget subject to all those sort of funding uncertainties from central government. I think the timetable you've seen for programme for change is February, March at the present time. And even if programme for change had been implemented, we would have seen a phased introduction. So there'd always be some reserves used to support the budget in that first year. So I'm comfortable with where we are, but clearly the proposals do need to come forward in the next couple of months.
Tim?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really sorry. I'm just really struggling to understand the bit about buses and refunds and things like that. So if I just go through how I understand it, could you just clarify that I'm not talking rubbish? So the Mayor is proposing to put up his non-fire, non-police element of council tax up to £17 for a Band D property, and that raises 28 million. Is that right? No, that raises £12 million roughly. And then in addition, we get a grant, a bus service operators grant of 13 million, and that adds up to the total budget roughly, but we're giving £8 million of that back to districts to cover an increased transport levy. Is that right?
Broadly. So the increase in the mayoral precept, so it's the non-fire bit. So the fire bit is frozen at £59.95. The current mayoral precept is £8 on top of that. So it's a comprehensive £67.95 at the moment. That is going to go up by £9. That generates £6.75 million that the mayor is raising for bus, but can't directly spend it on bus in the coming year. He's then got available to himself the...
Just repeat that. Just go back to the line then. We go back to the beginning then.
Right. The current mayoral precept is £67.95. So that's the inherited £59.95 for the fire service. That was set by the previous fire authority, frozen as you moved into 2018-19. £8 was then added to that for mayoral, what are mayoral functions, which include the mayor's own costs, the cost of the spatial framework work, some of the TFGM policy and strategy work. So that was where we are at the moment. £9 extra is going on to the precept. That raises £6.75 million. But in addition to that, the surpluses on the council tax collection fund relating to the mayoral precept, which are currently forecast at £1.3 million. So your treasurers are all notifying to me you've got surpluses, you're going to pay those over to the combined authority for the mayoral function, and then there's a small part of what was in the budget for the mayor in 2018-19 being freed up. So in total, the mayor is going to give grants totaling £8.3 million to districts in relation to the increase in the transport levy. So the levy will go up by £8.3 million. The mayor will give grants to the districts so that on a pound-for-pound basis, you'll be back where you would have been without this. Had the order been in place, we wouldn't have needed to do this. This is a workaround because the parliamentary order has been stuck for the last 12 months. And in a sense, we're working around the inability to get that order in front of Parliament and approved, but in a legal way that the mayor can make grants to districts under the same sort of powers that the Secretary of State has to make grants to local authorities.
Tim again.
Thank you. Can I just ask a follow-on question? So I guess there is a possibility that the order doesn't happen at all before 31st of March because there are other things going on. It must be a possibility. And I just wondered what the impact is then on our 19-20 budget if we're not able to do the bus things which are assumed.
We can do what we want on this basis, whether we get the order or not. If the order comes through, it makes life simpler in that bus becomes a clear mayoral responsibility. He can fund that directly rather than having to pass the money back through the districts. So if the order comes in, the levy will be reduced by 6.75 million and 6.75 million of the grants will not be made to the districts. The other bits, the collection fund surplus and things still need to feed back into the districts for this year. So this all hangs together. It's a bit odd, but it is because we haven't got the order. But the order doesn't come through, we're fine. We can still carry on.
David.
Yes, I'm mindful that the increase this year, looking at it, unless I'm mistaken, is going to have the same effect on our local council tax increase as it did last year. We're declaring for our local services at about 3.99% this year, and I think that's probably equivalent to what most people are. Last year, the mayoral precept increases pushed us up by another 0.5%, which is quite difficult to explain to the general public. And it looks as though something similar will happen again this year, if not more so. My main question, though, is about what we've not got here is details of the police precept, because we're being told that the mayor will be able to increase that by a further £12 on top, which again pushes our headline council tax up even further. I'm presuming that the police precept is running in parallel with this, and that decision will be made in the next, quite soon. Is that a decision also, the police precept, purely for the mayor, or does that have to go through Gmca as well by a parallel process?
It's certainly not part of the Gmca process. The process is the mayor makes a proposal to the police and crime panel, which is one representative of each district and 2 independent members. They are meeting, the police and crime panel meet on the 31st of January, so there will be a proposal to them. They can veto his proposal and ask him to reconsider it, but that's the end. As long as he's reconsidered, can change it by £1, sorry, even a penny, I think, he can then implement that. So it doesn't go through the CA. It's not part of the CA budget process. Goes on, in a sense, in isolation, but in parallel to it. What is out at consultation at the moment is that the government have said that the police and crime commissioners, and the mayor is the police and crime commissioner for Greater Manchester, can increase the precept, the Band D precept, by up to £24. So 12 was the figure last year that the mayor agreed that was the maximum last year. They've said £24 is the maximum that's allowed for the current year, and the consultation that's out at the moment is between the range of 0 and 24, and asking for views on that, but also sets out, it's in the public domain so you can see, but actually sets out how that money would be spent, how the extra funds would go into recruiting extra officers and other investments in the service. So that consultation is going on at the moment, will be reported back on the 31st of January, and the mayor will be making his proposal to that panel.
Yvonne and then Stella.
Just on the £24 increase, will that be a decision for individual authorities, or is that going to be a joint thing that all of them have got to agree?
The mayor sets it, and that is the end. The districts will include that in their council tax bills, in your formal resolutions of the overall. But it's not an issue for you to consider as district councils. Clearly, the police and crime panel are your representatives, so they can comment to the mayor through the police and crime panel. But that is the formal process. So if the mayor issues a precept for the PCC component, you have to include that in your council tax bills. Just to say the £24 is the Band D. Obviously, it spreads across the band. There was some confusion last year as to whether that was £24 was per household. It is per Band D, so the majority of households will get a lesser charge on their council tax bills for the Band A, Bs and Cs. But there was confusion last year that it's not a per capita, it's per Band D charge.
Stella and then Bernard.
Thank you, Chair. On a different part of the budget, really, which I couldn't find very much on, the spatial framework that you said was covered by the original mayoral precept last year for the work that went into completely rewriting it. It's assuming then that will continue to take as much of the budget as it did last year, as the extra putting on is on top of what was put on last year, if you follow me. Sorry, I didn't make that very clear. But you said that it covered stuff like, you know, the spatial framework, and presumably that work is ongoing, and it's budgeted to be about the same as last year then?
From memory, last year's budget was £630,000. We're budgeting £800,000 this year. So it's not 800 on top of 600. It's 800 as distinct from 600. If you will. It's another £180,000 on what it was, and they briefly described. So we've taken advice from the staff in the CA who are running through that process, and they've put together a budget which does include a contingency sum, because it's inevitable that something is going to come with some extra costs that aren't anticipated. So it's set at £800,000 for the coming year, and that's in on page 7 of the report, paragraph 2.7. You can see the spatial framework figure.
Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I only picked up these papers when I came in. I've just started to listen and to try and read them and understand them. My mind is more directed to, if I may say so, the ratepayers and their expectations and what they feel they're going to have to pay. They have something in their mind anyway, and what they don't like is that wherever they go to these days, there is a price increase. Somehow or other, I mean, it seems to be complex. When, in fact, you come to a decision on it, and indeed the respective districts, will you be able to succinctly put out your observations and notes on this so that there is an understanding? It's difficult in the first place, isn't it, to get people to understand the final figure? And it's a hard task to do it. But it has to be done, in my view. Otherwise, actually, we all stand, actually, to be very heavily criticised because it's an increase. In my borough, we've always tried very, very hard, actually, to explain things. It isn't the easiest thing to do. And there's a political balance as well, which affects it. So all I'm saying to you is I'm struggling at the moment. You can't pick up figures and understand them right away. But the public have their own views and they do assess things. So I do hope somehow or other, I mean, we're scrutinising. I'm saying to you, when you do come to the final conclusion, please will you try and explain it in a way that the public are going to understand what you're doing. Thank you very much, that's all.
Any other comments from... So I've got two... So is there any proposed increase for fire? Or any... Are we out in consultation in the same way we are for police on fire?
No, we're not required to consult on the fire part of the precept. The police consultation is a statutory part of the PCCs. So in a sense, the fire is part of the overall mayoral general bit, and that part of it is frozen. There is additional council tax income for fire because the tax base is growing, and that's built into the budget. And I say the gap in the fire budget is made up through reserves at the present time. But there's no the consultation we will do is with the business community, and once the proposals have gone through on Friday, I will be contacting the chamber to inform them of the proposals, and we had a quick dialogue with them last year, but that's the only statutory consultation on the non-PCC, non-policing bit of the precepts.
So it appears that the £9 increase, which is the mayoral element, is entirely going to buses, is that correct?
Yes.
So he's not actually having an increase himself for others, so this is new responsibilities?
Well, it's certainly new spend, yes.
Right. Okay. Yes. And there is a potential for up to £24 for the police precept. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what.
So
that is what's being consulted on.
So it is possible that last year's figure of £67.95 could go to £100.95.
No.
Okay.
The police, the mayoral general precept. So there are two precepts set by the mayor. The mayoral general precept is £67.95, and that may go up by the £9.
Yeah.
The PCC precept from memory is £174.30, and that may go up by £24. So the total together is circa £250 at the present time. It
Fine.
could go up by 9 plus 24, but the 24 is not on the £67, it's on the £174 PCC
Fine.
precept.
Great. I'm just trying to understand it in the way that a member of the public would understand it. There are members of certainly members of the Traffic Council, and no doubt members of every of the 10 councils that don't understand the structure, and it's very so they'll just see a bottom line and think the whole thing's been hiked up, and the centralised, the GMCA portion is disproportionately increasing. Anyway, fine. I understand and I hope the public understand.
Just to comment on the bills, you can see the bills show on the face of them the increase in the different components. So they'll be able to see the increase in your own, and that's quite variable across the 10. It'll see the increase in the mayoral general bit, and there'll be a percentage increase in that, and then there'll be a figure of the PCC precept and the increase in that. So if people read their bill, they can see. If you just look at what's taken by a direct debit out of your bank account, which I suspect most of us do, you'll need to go behind that to understand the reasons for them.
Thank you for that. And one more question, which you can't see any breakdown on. On page 7, the breakdown of the 28 million. I've got 3.9 million for transport policy and strategy. Is that for transport and policy and strategy, or is that for policy and strategy for transport? And if it is, 3.9 million for transport seems very small, in which case what's that actually going on, or is that a policy in the same way that the 800,000 for spatial development is policy?
It's the policy and strategy team within TFGM. So that used to be part of the levy in the past. Last year it became a mayoral function and transferred over to the mayoral precept. So if you go back a year, those costs landed on the precept but came off the levy. So the districts paid a reduced levy, and it is policy and strategy relating to transport. It's a team in TFGM, and then an apportionment of various other people working on policy and strategy in TFGM. So it's effectively, it would have been part of the levy in the old days, but because it's now a mayoral function, it's been moved across into the precept.
So in very simple terms, it's costing £4 million to work out our strategy for transport for Greater Manchester.
In short, yes.
Yes, in short. So as the Treasurer said, it is a team of people who work on various policy and strategy things. So, for example, work feeding into both the delivery plan that was recently published, work feeding into the spatial framework, and then longer-term policy and strategy development for transport. So it's internal people, as Richard said, a number of allocations of people's time, and there'll be some external costs included within that as well. And that number is exactly the same in the 1920 budget as it was in the 1819 budget.
That doesn't jump out of these papers. Could I ask, or we can make a recommendation, I'd look for support from the committee on this, that we change that line to say what it actually is. I think transport, policy and strategy is a way of trying to hide that. I think the people of Greater Manchester might be a bit shocked to realise that to come up with the strategy for the transport, £4 million was quite rich year on year. I appreciate it's not gone up. That's just, so that, would I get any support from my committee for that? Colin, Tim. Yeah, right, we're there. So can we change that line so it's really clear what it is, please? Thank you.
I just wanted, and I don't know whether it's me being really stupid, but I find it really difficult to understand this budget process, and I appreciate it's really complicated. So I don't know whether I'm the only one. Perhaps everybody else understands it perfectly. It just feels like it's a very, very complicated process that's not laid out in an understandable way. So I don't know whether that's just my feedback, and other people can say it's all fine or whatever you say what you want. But for me, I could just do with it being made simpler to understand. I appreciate it's a really complicated issue, combined authority finance, but at the moment I am not understanding it, and I guess we are here to scrutinise it. and I'm saying I can't because I don't understand it. So, and I'm not stupid. I've been a finance manager for 20 years. You know what I mean? So I do understand figures, but I don't understand this at the moment. So I am failing to scrutinise it. Perhaps it's just me.
I don't think it's you. Probably the only person in this building who understands it, to be honest. I struggle sometimes. It is very complex. What will come back next time going to the CA is a bit of a scene-setting report as to what's the strategy overall, linked into the mayoral's announcement at the early January CA meeting about the future vision for GM, and we'll try and link parts of that to the individual investments that are going on across the board. What we can do, haven't done so at the moment, drafted, is try and pull together all the sources of funding. So in one place you can see, you know, where's the money coming from. So some of the money in the mayoral precept will end up with TFGM to spend, some of it will end up with the fire service. So we can do that sort of analysis, so hopefully you can see where the building blocks are. But it is a complex and shifting picture, so that, for example, as the mayoral functions develop, some of those will, some of the mayoral functions will be new functions, some of them will be existing functions funded that are currently funded through the transport levy, for example. So when the order goes through and bus becomes a responsibility of the mayor, there'll be another circa £85 million ending up in the mayoral budget. That's a figure that's going to be specified in the order. The funding for that will come through something called a statutory charge, so not through the precept or a levy, but another charge on the district. So every time something moves, the sources of funding, maybe the precept, maybe the statutory charge, maybe some other source of funding. So it is a complex and developing picture. What we've got here is the start of that, in a sense, linking in the bus bits. But it's not, if you look at the CA as a whole, what's a mayoral and a non-mayoral function is quite complex, I'm afraid. But I think if we can do that overall table that summarises everything, that will probably be helpful to you.
Can I just, I'm just going to refer, I'll come to you in a second, Colin. I'm just going to move back to my transport policy thing, because I've just quite shocked me. Can we do, could I ask you to do we'll call it a deep dive. Could somebody tell us for our next meeting how much we have spent on transport policy and strategy for the past, let's say, 5 years? The fact that we're going to be at 8 million over last year and this year, because it's not changed, it's shocking. I appreciate it's a moving feast, transport and strategy, but actually, I imagine you would create a strategy. I'd just like to know how much, year on year, for the past 5 years, we have spent on coming up with a strategy.
Would it be helpful, Chair, in that regard, to just put some context around it and just outline the things that have been delivered? So, for example, the 2040 strategy, the delivery plan, the work we've been doing with Chris Boardman and colleagues around cycling and walking and the like, so we can, if we frame a paper that clearly has the numbers in, but probably equally, if not more importantly, just sets out the work that's been done against that spend.
That would be helpful, because members don't know, and the public. Now you mentioned the Chris Boardman thing, we've got 150 million to spend, so obviously it's going to cost some money to put that together. I appreciate that, but on the reading of it, and the line is very blurred. That would be good to have a paper on that. When we're going to fit it in is another matter, but I think I'd like an overview on that. You can only pick specific items in a report this depth, and you've got to jump out off the page to you. So yeah, I would appreciate that if you could perhaps work with Andrew, working out, or the new person when they arrive. That would be good. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I think Bernard and Tim have picked up on two important points, actually, and Richard touched on an issue at the very end of his last comment. At the Audit Committee, GMC and its predecessor, as it were, we usually get a simplified breakdown of the budgetary implications, if you like, so that you've got a simplified sheet that used to be sort of part of the pre-meeting, if you like. And I wonder whether perhaps something like that would have been of some help to us, perhaps on this occasion. And I think that's what Richard might have in mind, or something along those kind of lines that would be of benefit to all members, and of course to the districts that we represent. On Bernard's point, I think it's worth bearing in mind that the vast majority of councillors, if not all of them, will probably be working on a similar figure this year to that which they were working on last year, the 3.99. So the wider community, as it were, that will be bearing the brunt of these costs will see that there is obviously no change in the majority of council's position in terms of 3.9, as it were, that it will be consistent with last year and possibly previous year's figures. The Gmca precept, as it were, is clearly set for a significant change, a significant increase, and I think it's important that that is explained fully, so that when the council tax bills are eventually circulated to the wider community, that it does contain a very sort of succinct explanation as to how that precept is made up, so that they can see there is a clear distinction between the district councils and Gmca, or it's very easy to say, well, it's all your fault, you know, what's going on here. And of course, members and others will then be faced with the prospect of having to explain all this in some detail. So I think that needs working on and needs thinking about, so that when it does drop on behind the doormat, behind the letterbox, as it were, that it's clear immediately as to what the implications are in terms of this rise. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to comment on that?
Just two comments. I mean, one, the position across Greater Manchester in terms of district's own bills is quite mixed. Doesn't really want to comment, David, but you know, we have been looking at the overall picture, and it is quite mixed. It's not that everyone's going for the 3.99 at their local level. In terms of the what lands on the letterbox, clearly the bill lands on the letterbox, but you don't get the leaflets these days. They're all online, so people do have to go and look for what is going on. So we are mindful that those need to be clear as to what is happening, and the story from the PCC side and what you're getting for if the Mayor decides to put the precept up by £24, what does that buy? That's clearly part of the consultation that's out at the moment. And likewise for the mayoral general bit, what is the £9 going on, the linkage of that to the bus work? But as I said earlier, most people look at the bottom line of the bill, perhaps they don't even open it, and you just look at your direct debit going out. So I think, you know, I've talked to our press colleagues about making sure that it's clear. Yes, yeah.
Right. One more, if anybody else apart from Joanne. So I'll take Joanne and then we'll close this one down.
Going on what Colin's just said, is when we say the £24, it doesn't really mention that it's a £24 on a D band. So we've found in the past that people then think that it is across the board. And I think, well, as we say £24 and we understand it's on a D band, that doesn't come across to the public either. In fact, I found that a lot of the public last time thought that that was per week. So, you know, it's explaining it in more detail. Having to say to somebody it's not £10 a week, it's £10 over a year, and it depends on your banding, etc. You know, then I think this is where we do need to be a bit more clear in when we're presenting this to our residents. I think, yeah, it does come across as quite a big issue.
I think you're right, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, I think some of the press picked up last year that the PCC precept went up £12 last year, and it was £12 ahead, I think, was the starting point. So it wasn't even £12 per household. And I think what we've focused on, both in the report, trying to explain what it is across each band. A band B is the average household in Greater Manchester, and certainly the literature that's put out from here has to say the band D, because that's the figure you have to fix in statute, but we do make clear that the average household it's not £9, it's £7, because it's a band B. So I think we're doing our best, but you're right, I think some of the reporting was very confusing last year, and no doubt it'll end up as £24 everybody. Well, it won't be £24 for everybody. It's £24 per household affected on your bill. Some will pay, forget how it works out at the bottom end, 16 or something, but the top end you'll be paying 48 for policing in the sort of 2,000 band H properties there are in GM. So we've got that whole analysis in the report, so that people can see if they look. But yeah, I think there is an important message, but we're mindful of that.
Maybe we could put it on the side of a bus. That always works well, doesn't it? What nobody's commented on particularly is the fire. Has anybody got any questions on fire budget, etc.? You get off lightly there, Jim. That's all right. Fantastic. So I'm now going to take... so we're not going to move on to the budget for the waste levy at this point. We're going to go to age-friendly Greater Manchester, item 7. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm Brenda Warrington and I'm the portfolio lead for this particular agenda item. And one of my first questions was, why do we need an ageing strategy? You know, that is a fundamental question, isn't it? And I do think that we have to sort of get our heads around this because, frankly, the numbers do speak for themselves. And I do have a few statistics that I'll share with you at the end. But there is a very significant demographic change, not just in Greater Manchester, but across the world, believe it or not. And since 2010, over 700 cities have actually joined the World Health Organization network of age-friendly cities to actually address this particular area. And interestingly, from a UK point of view, Manchester was the very first to actually join in the very first tranche. So it's something that we're quite proud of. It's not something that we dreamed up ourselves. It's something that is a worldwide need. We actually joined before London, which I think we're quite proud of, to be honest with you. And key national and international reports since the 1990s have all been calling for action. There are massive inequalities in Greater Manchester amongst BME and others. Inequalities increase with age, of course. I think we're all very aware of that. And age is everybody's business because, of course, we all age day by day by day. And if we're fortunate enough, you know, we'll reach a ripe old age that we'd like to think we can enjoy. And so we do need to integrate ageing in everything that we do. Because generally, I would say to you that people don't think about ageing. And when you talk about the term ageing, there is a misconception because people often think of care for the very elderly, you know, frailty, things like that. And that is not what this is about. The age-friendly agenda is not just about health and social care. It's about housing, it's about transport, culture, employment and skills for people in the older age bracket. And, of course, you know, we do need to make sure that this agenda is something that we start to talk about quite naturally rather than not thinking that it exists. And so the role of local authorities in all of this is something that has been being explored for a short time. And each of the 10 local authorities is committed to developing a local plan by the end of this financial year. And if you look at pages 20 and 21 in your report, you'll see what the different authorities are actually doing. And I've no doubt you'll notice that each authority has come up with a very different way of tackling the age-friendly agenda. So that in itself is interesting, and I'm sure that we will start to look at compiling those and seeing how we can learn off each other, so to speak. The Ageing Hub is working with local lead officers in all of the 10 authorities, and obviously we want to make sure that their plans are supported. The age-friendly strategy is very dependent on the delivery of local plans, but of course it does need the support of leaders and elected members in all of the localities. And the Older People's Network has been very instrumental, very, very helpful indeed in informing this agenda, and we do thank the Older People's Network for the work that they do. So thinking about how we need to change, we know that older people can often be treated unfairly. The language used can be discriminatory and it can be condescending. And some services can be difficult to access because of age. and there is a lot of evidence to support this. All of our institutions need to think about ageing very differently, because not all older people are lonely. They're not all living in care homes. Older people are actually an asset. They run businesses, they carry out caring duties, they participate in culture, in volunteering, and of course they work. And they have lots of positive life experiences to share. So we are planning a campaign around ageism to try to start to change that culture, that thought process about ageing. And just a few of the key facts to close. The Greater Manchester population is set to grow by 8% by 2039. And at that point, it's anticipated it will reach 3 million. And that will be driven by the growth of older people. In 2018, 1.2 million people aged over 50 in Greater Manchester, and by 2039, 1.55 million people aged over 50 will be living in Greater Manchester. By 2039, the Greater Manchester working population is set to grow by 2%, and the number of Greater Manchester residents aged 65 plus will increase by 40% over that same period and will reach around 625,000. The current Greater Manchester population is 2.8 million. 640,000 are aged under 18, 1.7 million are aged between 16 and 64, and 1.2 million are aged 50 plus, with 450,000 aged 65 plus and 54,000 aged 85 plus. So you can see the interesting statistics there. It's significant that a very vast majority of our population both are and will continue to be made up of that older age bracket. So in closing, Chair, can I just point out the recommendations to you? I'm sure you've read them, but it's always worth just restating them. We're asking you to note the progress made by the Ageing Hub and its partners, and we're asking you to endorse the strategic approach that we've set out in the report, which include a number of core features, which again, I'm sure you'll read. I don't need to read them out to you. We're looking for support for the next phase of development of the Ageing Hub, and of course the actions that are set out in the strategy. And we're looking for support for the second phase of Greater Manchester's 5-year partnership and with the Centre for Ageing Better. So, Chair, if I can just end there and ask if the officer, Pam Smith, wants to add anything to that.
Thank you, Chair. I think all I'd like to say is that Greater Manchester is recognised as a national and international leader in this space, and we're going to be having a conference in February where we're going to be launching the new brand, which is doing ageing differently, and we're going to use that as a platform to have further conversations around ageing, and as Brenda says, changing the language, changing the narrative, and taking this then to the next level over the next 5 years. And in doing that, we're going to be very conscious of refining some of our performance measures so that you can be assured that we're actually achieving the objectives that have been set around ageing. Thank you.
Very commendable. John?
Yes, I think this is very commendable, Chairman, that we are doing something like this. My own experience of it over the years, I remember when I was the age of 50, and this is about employment, and how we can, how can we get over to employees in Greater Manchester that are being made redundant at the age of 50 as I was. I think I went for interviews. I remember going for interviews, and I could see by the body language that, you know, the people that were interviewing me, I could sense it. You know, being in sales and marketing all my life, and you do tend to read these things of people, understanding body language, how they're presenting themselves to you in the job and what have you. And it's only because of my own resilience, and I would not be beaten by these people, that I finished up getting a really good job, a really 10 years, really happy experience in the job I had. But I wonder how we can, because I think ageism in employment still, I remember when I was a kid, there were jobs being advertised up to the age of 35, and you were on the scrap heap after 35. Absolutely disgraceful. So I wonder how we can influence employers in Greater Manchester, in our region, to really take this on board and really kill it off. That's what I would like to see. But I still believe there is a certain amount of discrimination in the employment field still today. And we need to really, eradicate it.
If I may respond to that, Chair. John, you're absolutely right. And this is one of the areas that have been picked up, the employment factor. And as you say, anyone that loses the job, around age 50, they're not yet ready for, pension or retirement. But nevertheless, they do want to continue. But employers are not always looking. They seem to want the kids out of college and the graduates and things like that. But it will be a job of work, actually, to change the attitude of some employers. I think work has actually already started on this, so that older people, their experiences, their skills, their value is actually recognised and applauded, rather than them, as you say, being perhaps written off. And so that is very much part of the work that this strategy will undertake.
David?
Yes, I just wonder how, in our work with employers, going back to the same point of John, we can talk to them about a very pertinent issue for older people who are in work, which is their sick absence procedures, because they are a lot more robust in many, certainly private sector organisations and the public sector, than they used to be. People in employment in their 50s and 60s nowadays, and retirement age, I know because it's nearly affected me, retirement age for men has now moved to moving towards 66 now. It will become 68 in a decade. The people in their 50s and 60s will tend to have health problems, which will mean that there are sick absence issues. And many employers now very radically start monitoring people as soon as they've had quite low levels of sick absence, and they move very quickly to redundancy on the grounds of inefficiency through ill health. And that's a big issue for people. I actually worked in the old DHSS during the 1980s, when large numbers of men in their 50s in manual jobs, in old-style manual jobs, were made redundant. Vast swathes of them, not only did they have no educational qualifications, they had a lot of them had acquired physical health problems because of the natures of their jobs. And basically, because I was there, I administered it, the government put millions of people on invalidity benefit to hide them away. Now, the problem is those people do have health problems, and if employers are going to be very rigorous wanting people who are fit and will not have much time off work, that's going to cause a real problem to older workers.
Yes, again, excellent points and very factual. I think one of the areas of work that is also embodied within this strategy is, of course, trying to make sure that people look after themselves, sometimes far better than they do at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on in the health world, isn't there, about public health, for example, changing our lifestyle, changing our habits, walking, cycling more, things like that. There's a lot going on to persuade people to live a healthy lifestyle. And given that, given that that is possible, then we would expect that people, as they grow older, are not going to become unhealthy. They will maintain a healthy lifestyle. This is not going to happen overnight. We fully understand that. It's something that we have to drive, change cultures, change attitudes, change mindsets indeed. And I'm sure that everything that you've described that has happened in the past, you know, is absolutely accurate. It's the kind of thing that we need to change for the future. And this is why this particular agenda is so important, because if we don't make a good start to do something, and that obviously involves lobbying our MPs, let's say, because sometimes some of these things, as you said, may be areas that are driven by government, whether it's changes to the way people are looked at in sickness, etc. So there is considerable work to do on a lot of fronts, and I think all of the areas that we know are issues, are problems that have been inherited from the past. I'm sure that Paul actually has got a really good handle on many of those, if not all of them, and you know they are on that agenda to try to address.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please
do. And we've also recognised in that Working Well programme on page 7 of the report, it just gives you an indication of how we're going to be working with those people who you identify who could be at risk of falling out of employment because of disability or health issues, and also those who have newly fallen out of employment and how we can support them back in. So the Commission for Working Well are actually working alongside this strategy, and given that we're looking at people who have got health conditions, a high proportion of those will be over 50s. So we're actively working with that group of people.
Linda, and then I'll take Stella.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on my other hat from being a councillor, I am a recruitment consultant and I work with lots of different companies. In fact, I'm off to Nestlé to do some recruitment after this meeting. And I find that more and more now we are, I've been in recruitment a long time, but things are changing. More and more people are being taken on, 60 plus. I've done it, taking people on in that sort of age group. Sometimes, though, there are barriers. When some of these people come for interview, they've not had an interview for a long, long time. They could have been with a company for years and years. And it's very difficult for them to come into an interview without any training or anything like that. And I think these are the things that we need to look at for people who've been out of work perhaps for a long time. They need real support to go through these interviews in order to get the jobs. And, I found that some of the people that I've employed for various companies, one chap, real success story, came in at ground level. Within 2 or 3 years, he was up there managing a lot of people, and they looked upon him as their dad. He was great, and he really got on with the people in the company, and that was with Barclays Bank. So there are success stories, but one thing that I think we need to be really, really hot on is communication, how to get the communication of all these things out to people. It's key, because if people don't know and they don't know where to go, where to get the help, then it's all futile. We really, really need to have our head on the communication of all these things. There are some really good things going on in Stockport as far as age concerned. I was at the Plaza Theatre last night where all the volunteers were there, 65, 70 plus. There were about 100 people in the room, giving them a thank you for helping with the pantomime. These people keep that theatre going. We've got some younger people there too that we employ. And to see them interacting together is wonderful, and that's just one little instance. And I think the elderly, I'm 65 myself, and I think I've still got a lot to give. And I think that we really need to capitalise on the elderly population out there, because they have got so many skills that we need, and they're happy to volunteer, which again is free. It doesn't cost anything. So I think well done for what you're doing, and I shall support Pam in Stockport as much as I can. She knows I've got my support. Okay.
Thank you. That's a really positive part of the report, actually. And I think the only thing I would want to add to what you've said is that a lot of elderly people, as well as never having an interview for a long time, lots of companies now want CVs, don't they? And they want everything online. And again, that is something that is pretty alien sometimes to that generation. So the support is necessary. And again, that's something that we have to look at to see how that can best be offered. Thank you.
Finally, Stella, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really, it was along similar lines to Linda's. It's just that there's obviously, as you say, people who are looking to be employed in slightly later life do need support, and I know that there are groups from job centres and so forth which will help people with their CVs and interview technique. But also, some of them may need completed retraining. Some will have transferable skills, but there'll be an awful lot who won't really necessarily want to start again at the bottom in the same type of work that they were doing before, or may not be capable of it, but will need to be retrained in something completely different, and that's quite expensive. So I'm sure that you are doing it, but is this part of the overall remit of the group?
Indeed, again, very positive comments. I agree. And you're right, not everyone wants to go into the same, you know, skill that, or job or place of work that they may have done previously. And it is about making sure that new opportunities are made available to people, you know, that want to experience them and want to take full advantage of them. So yes, that again will be very much part of the strategy. I know Paul's here making a lot of copious notes by my side, and all of these comments are very valuable to us in how we take this whole agenda forward. So thank you for that.
So that we've been asked to note it. I'd support it. I'm sure all members here, anything we can do within our own boroughs, let's push it forward. It's essential, long-term great benefits. So thank you for the report. Appreciate that. So we're going to go back to Richard now, which gives us the opportunity, if necessary, to just run straight to Part B, but when we get to that, bring it to the fore.
I think you probably need to take the two Part A, because you've got this in the waste procurement issue on Part A, I think. I think you've got a waste procurement.
I've got sorry, my error.
Yeah,
my error.
I'm thinking two Part A's and then two Part B's.
I have it in my mind, put me as one. Right, over to you. Go on.
So I'll just pick up the Part A report in the budget. Clearly this is the first year that the Combined Authority will have set the budget for waste, and particularly the levy on the district councils. As you're aware, we're part way through the procurement of the new contract, which is elsewhere on the agenda. So for the coming year, we've committed to delivering the levy that was set, the levy forecast that was set by the Waste Disposal Authority last February at £174.6 million, and delivering that this year and adjusting the budget through the use of reserves if necessary. We've included in the calculations of the district shares the latest information from districts about the tonnages, and plug that into this LAMA model that somebody can tell me what the local authority levy allocation model, and you can see at paragraph 1.2 and elsewhere the variation from what was forecast a year ago at district by district level. Part of the reason for moving from the previous inter-authority agreement to the LAMA was to give more stability at individual district levels. Anyone who was involved in waste before would see movements of millions of pounds caused by the actions of other districts. So if one district got ahead with recycling and saved lots of money, the other people would end up with an increased bill, and when they caught up, the first people end up with an increased bill. So the LAMA was designed to give more stability, and I think this has been achieved, as you can see at 1.2. So the districts are well aware of what they were expecting. We've also looked at the projected outturn for the current year, and are at the present stage proposing a net refund of £1.88 million to districts. That's based on the current forecast tonnages. That will be refreshed when we get to outturn, and people's numbers will go up or down if they overachieve or underachieve the tonnages that they're currently proposing. So it's a fairly steady state in relative terms. I was looking back at some of the refunds and extra charges for 2017-18, and again there were millions of pounds flowing backwards and forwards, but we've got a methodology now which is giving a significant degree of stability for districts, and we'll pick up in the Part B items some of the issues that lay behind it. So this is about the levy allocation and the total levy that we're going to set, and the more commercial parts we'll pick up in Part B.
Any comments on the waste? It's not changed much, so I'm comfortable with that.
Perhaps just should have said that this will come back again at your February meeting. We've got some tweaks to do, things like tax bases in terms of the levy, but in terms of what lies behind it, the tender evaluations will be reported to the Combined Authority at the 15th of February meeting, so we'll be refreshing the budget to reflect that, but there is no intention to change the levy or at this stage the apportionment beyond things like tax base changes, which will have a marginal impact on some of the numbers.
So I've got no questions. We will move on to David Taylor for the update on the procurement.
That would be Councillor Gwynn, Chair of the Waste Committee.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Councillor Alison Gwynn and I'm Chair of the Waste Committee. So this procurement update report provides an overview of the ongoing procurement process for waste services in Greater Manchester. As this is an ongoing procurement, the report is solely about the process and doesn't contain any confidential information relating to the tender submissions. Following termination of the waste PFI contract by the former Gmca, a short-term operating contract was entered into with Viridor Waste Greater Manchester Limited as the operator. At the same time, a procurement process was initiated in November 2017 on the basis of 3 lots based on waste stream and facility type. The procurement is based on a number of strategic objectives primarily aimed at improving recycling and landfill diversion performance and driving financial savings. Expressions of interest were received from 11 organisations across the 3 lots. Following evaluation, 3 organisations were shortlisted for each lot to progress into the competitive dialogue stage. In July 2018, these organisations were invited to submit an interim tender submission. Interim tenders were received from 3 organisations in Lot 1, 2 in Lot 2 and only 1 in Lot 3. Tender withdrawals were stated as being due to strategic fit of the procurement with their business plans. So a review was carried out on Lot 3 and due to ongoing uncertainty around the future requirements of the National Waste Strategy, it was decided to cancel Lot 3 and move the associated facilities into Lot 1 and for Gmca to procure third-party capacity to treat the bio-waste. So this bio-waste procurement is now underway. For Lots 1 and 2, final tender submissions were received from Suez and Viridor on the 20th of December. Evaluation is currently underway with a decision to appoint the preferred bidders programmed for the 15th of February Gmca meeting. And in the run-up to this decision, reports will also be presented to the Waste and Recycling Committee.
Could I just, that's my fault, that's a typo. That should say Suez and Veolia, not Suez and Viridor.
Ah.
Sorry about that.
Any questions? So as lot 3 has now been withdrawn and it's been put in with Lot 1, they had to fully resubmit?
No, the termination of Lot 3 occurred in October prior to the issue of the final tender documents. So we updated the suite of tender documents to reflect that position, and that's what Suez and Veolia have both bid against for Lot 1.
Obviously, everybody apart from BioWise, and I understand the issues around BioWise, not probably a great company, but not big enough or whatever. Obviously, there's certain risks for these third parties with Lot 3 in that everybody's pulled out of it. Are we trying to prime it by effectively sweetening the deal by lumping it in with Lot 1? I.e., you can get Lot 1, but you've got to take Lot 3 effectively, is what we're saying.
Well, Lot 3 is completely cancelled. We're just running with Lots 1 and 2. Okay. Is that
right? Yeah, I'm there now.
Right.
Yes, I've got that. Fine. So it's just the risk around Lot 3 that we're.
Yeah. When you say risk, can you quantify that?
Well, we'll be collecting. I call it green waste, but we haven't got anything to do with it. Which.
Yeah. So what we're doing is the 2 facilities that were originally in Lot 3, those will now be managed by the Lot 1 contractor. So the bio waste, mixed food and garden waste that you will all collect will come into those facilities under the management of the Lot 1 contractor. Gmca is in the process of procuring third-party treatment facilities, and the Lot 1 contractor will ship that waste onto those outlets for it to be treated.
Right, that's clear. What currently happens with that waste? Obviously, our treatment facilities, as I understand it, are broken.
Some of the material is treated at our facilities. About half of it is being treated off-site in exactly the way I've just described now.
And is that really, I'm looking for peace of mind, that element of it, because effectively that's what we will be doing, is that running well? Do we have backlogs
no,
building up? It's just flowing and it's quite normal?
Yes.
That's great, okay. Any other comments from the committee? David?
I'm not sure whether I should ask this now or you can reply in part two. I noticed that the lot 3 was merged in because everybody withdrew or the remaining one probably was not suitable. But I noticed that one of the contractors that withdrew from lot 3 also withdrew from lot 1, the same one. Was that because they it's almost like we put the lot 3 into lot 1 and they withdrew because they didn't want to get involved in that at all, and that leaves us with only 2 contractors in lot 1, which is a bit thin. You know, you'd like more than that to get the best price. So, did they withdraw because lot 3 went down, so they went out of lot 1 as well when it got merged in, or can you tell me that at this stage?
Could I answer that in part B?
Any other comments at this stage? Okay, thank you. So, registry key. So moving on, that was that update. Registry key decisions have all been published. We've all got that. Date of the next meeting, 12th of February, Gmca Boardroom, back to the normal time, 6 p.m, thankfully. And at this point, if there's any public... I don't think there is there? Is there anybody that shouldn't be here? Is Jim all right? Is Jim public? Oh, and the live stream. Okay, so I'm going to move the recommendation on that previous report. So can we note that previous report? That would be good. And at this, we'll cut the live stream and go to the part B.